Craig Stobo is with us now. Craig, g'day. Nice to have you on.
Yeah, good afternoon, Duncan. How are you?
Yeah, good. What did you make of that stuff that's just developing
Yeah,
out of Treasury? You would have picked up on that?
yeah. So I think the Minister of Finance in the last week or so that the surplus would be delayed past 27, 28, no, 2027, 2028, which tells you the path is more problematic. And the Treasury announcement today, I haven't read it, but generally speaking, I've been of the view that the economy continues to bounce along the bottom. There are some green shoots in terms of business confidence. The dairy payout lift by Fonterra, a substantial lift, is really important for the regions, but the contributions coming through from some companies, and we've spoken about retail, construction, some parts of the hospitality sector, as well as reductions in government expenditure, are obviously weighing on the growth outlook. So we do need our exports to fire, and the Fonterra payout is unequivocally good news. There's billions of dollars in the economy, but that will take some time to filter through into general activity as debts are repaid, etc. So not surprising in many respects. It does mean that the Minister has to focus again on managing those expenditures. So that's not a new story, but a delayed story.
I wonder if the tax cuts, which have obviously now firmly entrenched, appear to have had not much of an impact.
Well, no, I think when you look at it per person, you're right. Tax cuts. Well, let's be clear. The increase in the tax thresholds, which is what it was, is helpful, but it doesn't compensate you for past inflation. I think the number we talked about last week was, a 22% rise in inflation since March quarter 2020 until September quarter this year. And those benefits from tax adjustments don't compensate you for real costs, real living costs. So it's not flowing through into households as we would like.
This concerns me because what the message in there is the government needs to loosen the strings a bit and maybe the cost savings may have helped us in our search for a surplus, but they certainly haven't helped growth in any way, and maybe they've gone too far, Craig.
Well, I think that some of the forecasting here is clearly the result of two very large numbers, tax side and the expenditure side, and so the deficit or surplus is a small, result of those two very large numbers. I suspect that the tax revenues are not coming through as they would hope. Like I haven't seen the numbers, and expenditure is not coming back as fast as the government would like. So the result is a delay to the surplus or slightly worse position from the fiscal perspective. But I think from what you were saying, they were talking about the GDP growth outlook, right? So
that's a real concern.
That's a bit more challenging. But I wonder whether they factored in the dairy payout piece that only was released in the last week or so. But look at manufacturing. You've spoken a little bit about this. The closures of the OG companies, Penrose and Kinleith. In Kinleith's case, that was a closure of the paper mill, but the pulp mill keeps going, and they're going to import paper for their packaging plant, so it's not a complete closure. But Winstone out of Arakuni, with the closing of those two mills, the Alliance Works in Timaru, Smithfield. That plant's been around for 139 years, but some of this is related to changes in the way we use resources. So land use has changed a lot. So you may remember when land or sheep numbers were in the 70 million, around about 70 million sheep in the early 1980s, and I think this year we're south of 23 million sheep.
Yeah.
So if you've got a meat processing business, as Alliance had, and you had upwards of 36 meat land processing plants, and you have a reduction in supply, you're going to have to close, and now at 7 plants. They just have to cut the cost. So land use is changing from sheep and beef forms dairy and obviously forestry. So that does impact on, manufacturing output, doesn't it? Because that manufacturing's gone.
I wonder if the sort of midterm outlook is actually only just very average for New Zealand, and maybe we do bounce on the bottom at 2% or whatever it might be. We don't hit the 3.5% highs like we have before. I wonder if this new normal that we're going to have to get used to, because I don't see any circuit breakers, Craig, and especially with power prices the way they are. I wonder how much of an impact power prices have had on our production and manufacturing sector, because I know people have turned off the lights because they can't afford it, right? We've seen some businesses go out of business. What about the ones that have down-powered that we don't know about, and they've just gone to 3 days production or 4 days production because they can't afford it?
Yeah, well, I think the executives from OG, in reference to Kinley, said that the power price issue was part of the reason. So there are clearly other drivers. Profitability would be an obvious one. There is a question mark around our own potential where we could get to, yes. But I think that the real stark piece is that relative to our trading partners over the last 3 or 4 years, we've had a terrible GDP experience. Our trading partners have done better than we have. So that goes to our policy settings, our productivity, the nature of our businesses. Even though we've got a great market in China, for example, is that one reason that we could do better? Why are other countries doing far better than we are, or have done, in the last 3 or 4 years? And I think that's a really important policy question for Treasury to think about.
That's baffling to me, because to become wealthy as a country, you need foreign exchange. So you need to go and sell your things to the world. We're not going to be wealthy selling our houses to each other. So we need to go and create products that sell to the world and that are wanted by the world. It's really alarming to hear you speak like that, because we were the first to sign the trade deal with China. We were the first mover in that space in 2008. So we had a good position there. What's happened to us? Why have we lost not status, but why have we lost our place at the top there?
Yeah, we had our second major export earner, tourism, go from 22% of exports to zero when we locked New Zealanders down and shut the borders. And those tourism numbers, they're coming back, but they're not as strong as they were in 2019, 2020. Dairy is really important, and that payout will continue to produce revenues in terms of volumes and prices. So that's great for our exports. The third sector, which may surprise you, is, I understand, is New Zealand tech exports, and they've come from nowhere to be third in the list. So we are diversifying into services, IT and technology, which is great. And America is now our second largest export market, behind China, and that's the beef, wine, and some service exports. So I think we are diversifying, but we had a big chunk of our exports and our GDP absolutely smashed by those lockdowns, and we have been, relative to other countries, very, very dependent on those tourism flows.
I've done a bit of work on those tourism numbers, and I think we're about 30% shy of where we have been. And some of the expensive or high quality tourists, they just haven't returned. And I think we expected them to, but we never had a strategy to reach out to them and say, come on back, it's business as usual. They heard that New Zealand was locked down. And I think it's been, as you said, extraordinarily damaging. But also, we haven't spent the money going back out to the world to say, hey, we're here. We haven't had the America's Cup here, all sorts of things like that. And I just think it builds up, and then suddenly you've got the result, which is 30% down, which is huge money. It's massive money.
Yeah, and I think in the composition-wise, it's noticeable in Auckland and Queenstown that the Chinese travellers are not back in their numbers that they were in 2019. So, yeah, the composition's changed. Maybe the spend's changed as well. And you're not getting the flow through into hospitality and retail that you would have got if those tourism numbers had picked up.